playing some music, so forewarning if you have headphones on. I'm just giving it a few minutes before we start our presentation for our City, Our Future. So thank you for joining us today.
History so our kids can see where we came from and a new destiny. From Flint to Cali, water flowing pure and free. And my Department of Peace would melt guns into bike racks. Budget cuts to corporate kickbacks. If I was president, well, there'd still be drama. Takes a village to kill our generational trauma. So shake your spine, put your hands up high. We got a different kind of party in the White House tonight. If I was president, hey, what would I do? If I was president, hey, I'd ask you if you were president. Hey, what would you do if it was you? Me gusta la lima, me gusta el limón, pero no me gusta tanta corrupción. Me gusta la lima, me gusta el limón, pero no me gusta tanta corrupción.
Thank you everyone again for joining us. We're just giving a few minutes for everybody to jump into the call. The song that y'all are listening to is La Cafetera's If I Were President. Thanks for joining us on this rainy day. We'll start here shortly. Okay, thanks everybody for joining our City, Our Future today for our last People's Budget call as we prepare for the big council meeting happening this Wednesday. Just a quick, we'll start going through the slides and I'm gonna give you a quick introduction of our City, Our Future if you aren't familiar with us yet. Who we are. The reason why we are here, why we do this work is not because the system is failing us, but because we know the systems are working exactly as they were designed. Capitalism continues to crush us in its grasp and remind us that in profit-driven system, we are all disposable. Every day we witness the ways in which our communities are hurt and harmed. Many of us came together against a juvenile curfew. However, it was not until Malaysia Booker's murder that we realized we needed to fight back in a more strategic way. That's when our City, Our Future, or our City, Our Future, or our City, Our Budget was born. We realized the city budget was the key to ending the disinvestment of our communities and a concrete way to help ensure the safety of all of us. It put us against the Dallas Police Association, who was demanding more and more for an already bloated police budget. We showed up that day to solve the same problem but in different ways. The DPA aimed to solve crime with more cops and policing, while we knew the answer relied on refunding our communities so that our basic needs are met and that people could live with dignity. Ultimately, the priorities of the City Council compromised the ability of our communities to thrive during a global pandemic. The uprising that resulted after the public murder of George Floyd recentered our focus on taking back what belongs to us, a budget that reflects the will of the people. We went from reimagining public safety to calling for the City of Dallas to defund the police. We changed the name to Our City, Our Future after discussion around why we were doing this work. It wasn't just about getting people involved in the budget process. It was also about fighting for a future we could believe in, one that we could that would give us care, not cops. And now I'll pass it on to Foz.
Cool, thank you for that, Pat, and welcome everybody. So I'm Foz, and we're going to go over the budget, People's Budget timeline. So here's the work we've done from early June all the way up to September 23rd. This doesn't represent the months of work that went into our July lunch or the year we spent before that fighting in 2019 for the budget cuts and learning more of the ins and outs of the budget process. So in these 3 months, we're able to release 3 reports, talk to over 700 people, launch our first cohort of ambassadors, and solidify the divestment demand. And I see some of our ambassadors on the call. So thanks again for that work that you put into it. So then we'll go to the next slide, which is budget demands. So you can see this graphic here. After our ambassador session and survey were concluded, we drafted a 35-page budget report that outlined Dallas residents' needs and desires broken out by district. So this comprehensive report represented over 700 people and was widely circulated to many council members, but many council members didn't give it much attention. So our report called for $200 million divestment from the Dallas Police Department budget. Most importantly, it called for a decrease in the scope and militarization of the force. These 2 factors are what is crucial to the idea of defunding the police. So this graphic is a visual of all of the city could invest if we took the work of defunding DPD seriously. Imagine what this would mean for the countless of us who continue to struggle, right? So I guess next slide, please, Pat. Awesome. So as this slide indicates here, so after our budget demands were released, we created a 2-pager for what we called priority demands. And these were essentially demands that we felt were doable with merely trimming the fat from the DPD budget. So this document was circulated with city council members, and the shorter document was not created because we felt the $200 million was unrealistic, but rather we'd seen wavering commitment to defunding by much of the council. And this document was a good gauge to see what kind of efforts council was willing to engage with. So far, we've seen the very little desire go beyond 7 million divestment that came from out of the initial city council city briefing in early September. So it's been a lot of work thus far, and we couldn't have done it without you all. So with that, we'll pass it on to Christian.
Thank you, Foz. Thank you all for joining our call. It's a little bittersweet because it's one of our last calls for this budget season, but don't fret, we will be back again next year, and the year after that probably, until we stop having to fight for what we deserve and we just get it. But I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon, but here's hoping, or here's fighting. So one of the things that we really want to stress is the fact of defund the police has sort of been a all-consuming almost hashtag at this point. And, we want to be very clear about what that actually means. Because I think there was a lot of co-optation about what the actual message is, what the intent was. And we want to be, honor the Black radicals who really were the ones to fight for and put this demand out there, and make sure that we're not sort of straying from that original message. And so we're doing this because we believe in meeting the basic needs of community instead of criminalizing people in need, and see police as a cause of harm, not a tool of justice. So when we say defund, we are talking about reducing the budget, the size, the tools, the scope, and the power of all institutions that police us. So the mechanisms by which people are punished, incarcerated, and more often hurt and killed, particularly Black people. And these systems do not serve us. So we want to instead focus on investing in and building entirely new infrastructures that will create actual safety, solidarity, and well-being for our communities. And we've kind of outlined 5 different sections as far as what actually defunding looks like, particularly in the context of DPD. So if you look at your slide, the first one being the budget, obviously we want to eliminate any DPD increases to their very bloated budget, as we like to say, that takes up so much of the resources that could be going into other things. We want to make sure to cut any police overtime, And we also want to be vigilant of any grants or additional agenda items outside of budget season that allocate DPD funds, which very often happens. And the DPA president, Mike Mata, has gone on record to say he basically has a blank check. So anytime that he needs more funds for DPD, he can just go up to council and ask. And we don't think that's any way to have run a city government, honestly, because you're just basically saying it doesn't matter what you do, we're going to keep on funding it, even though it's very clear that it's not working. The second section is size. We want to make sure to implement any hiring freezes, to get rid of our police academy, and to end pensions for officers who cause harm to the community. There are countless officers who've had no accountability, and often the only recourse for discipline or for bettering of behavior, it happens internally. And we've already seen that there are so many instances nationally and locally to where police officers who have a record of bad behavior are still on the force, are still policing, and we don't want to get it to the point to where someone has to be killed for somebody to take this seriously. The other area is tools. We want to look out for any new military or surveillance equipment additions. We don't think that the police need tanks to do their job, and often because they've used this as a way of intimidating in circumstances that don't really make sense to why you would bring a tank out. For example, the MLK parade in South Dallas, I've seen so many tanks roll out there, their mounted patrol, and for no reason, because everybody's just out there having a good time and celebrating MLK. But we know that a lot of that has to do with the makeup and demographic of who actually goes to those events. And then we also want to take away any funds from any surveillance or tech tools. These are often sort of pushed as like being neutral to race, and so that they're better than police because they don't really go one way or another with who they police. But that's actually not true, because the people who are creating these algorithms, who are creating these systems, are not neutral. So it's basically impossible that this technology could be neutral as well. The other part is the scope. We want to end SRO contracts. School resource officers, for those who are unfamiliar with that abbreviation, we don't think that children need to be policed in school. We think children need to feel safe and need to have spaces where they can have their behaviors addressed and not punished. We want to be able to limit interactions of police with residents in public spaces, because often that happens around people who are in need and don't have their needs met. We demand that police not be the first to respond to mental health crises, which is currently what happens, and why we've been pushing for civilian first responders in so many of those instances locally. We want to stop criminalizing homelessness. Getting a ticket that you can't pay and then getting put in jail is not going to address the fact that people do not have homes. The only solution to homelessness is housing. And we also want to end any collaboration with ICE. Dallas has a very vibrant immigrant community, and we want to make sure that every Dallas resident can live their life free of fear and free of the fear of deportation in particular. And then the last part is power. We want to engage in a participatory budgeting process. We think that if this is our money, this is public money, the public should have a significant say in what we do with that money, rather than the DPA or other moneyed interests being able to sort of sway the vote of the council, or all of North Dallas really having the big say in what the budget, what gets put into the budget, and largely neglecting people in the southern sector. We also want full transparency of the DPD budget. It's really, really difficult to get any sort of line item specifics. And so we don't actually know how much things cost, how much the police is actually spending, which I think is a huge problem. And then we want to demand that DPD related costs actually be categorized as such and not under the guise of other departments, which often ends up happening. And then we're not actually able to have any accountability for how much the DPD budget actually is. So anytime we are talking about defunding and are presented with solutions, we have to ask ourselves, does this demand or solution reduce funding to the police? Does this challenge the idea that police increase safety? Does this reduce tools, tactics, technology that police have at their disposal? And does this reduce the scale of policing? And with that, I am going to Oh, no, it's next. It's still me. I'm just kidding. I thought I was passing it over. So how are we going to do this? Well, we have a Wednesday council meeting, and it will be the council meeting where the budget vote actually happens. So this is what the agenda looks like for Wednesday. There are 4 opportunities to speak. Open mic does not require you to speak on any particular issue and happens at the beginning of the meeting. However, you are only allowed to speak during open mic once a month. So if you've previously spoken during open mic in the last month, you will not be able to sign up again. However, there are other opportunities to speak. And so you can sign up for a specific agenda item, and there is not a limit to how many agenda items you can sign up for. So if you haven't spoken at open mic, you could technically sign up 4 different times to speak. I would suggest it if you have Wednesday off, or if you have the ability to have some flexibility in your day to listen in and be able to call in during those times. Or if you're only able to speak once, open mic, or, and I'll talk about the specific agenda items, or the budget line item would be the best time for you to speak about the issues that are important to you. And if we can take it to our next slide, I will tell you what items those are. So when to speak, there are 3 items that 2 of which are in the consent agenda. So hoping that by us signing up for those agenda items, those will be pulled from the consent agenda, and we'll be able to have a discussion on them in isolation. So number 1, again, goes back to the tools for DPD that we talked about earlier, and it's authorizing money for helicopters for maintenance and parts, which sounds kind of harmless, but again, this is money being pulled from the general fund, and it's not being pulled from the DPD budget. So it's one of those instances to where it is again increasing the size of DPD's budget, and not really sort of making it a big deal. And also because we know that often these helicopters are used for surveillance, particularly during protests. And so we think that it's something, if it's going to be pulled from, if it's going to be funded, it should be funded from the DPD budget and not from the general fund. The other agenda item is number 68, which is a budget, and it concerns the budget and power for DPD. Number 68 is an example of how money is often allocated to DPD without it being super obvious. The heading for this was strategic partnerships and governmental affairs, because this is a DOJ or the Department of Justice grant. And this grant is often approved without much review because it's what the city calls free money. However, this grant in particular is historically used to boost law enforcement funds. In fact, of the 7 program areas that it is supposed to be used for, including mental health, drug treatment, education, and victim services, 60% goes to exactly 1, which is law enforcement. And if that sounds familiar, that's pretty evenly on par with the percentage of our budget that goes to the Dallas Police Department. And then lastly, number 92 is the actual city budget. It's important that we use this agenda item to be clear and specific about the failure of the proposed budget as it stands to actually defund DPD. So far, again, only $7 million has been removed from DPD's budget, but it doesn't mean that it will actually stay that way. And so, different council people have been proposing different types of amendments. So we're going to walk you through some of the ones that have been proposed. These are not set in stone. These are not items that we can speak on, but it is worth sort of acknowledging what those items are and who's proposing them. As you sort of think about your speech and your talking points, it's really crucial that you sort of keep these in mind. So if we can go to the next slide. Number 93, amendment number 93 has been proposed by the city manager himself. And it specifically goes towards funding the Office of Arts and Culture. So I know there are a lot of people who have been part of the Save OC3 efforts, and who really are big proponents of arts and culture being necessary for our communities to feel safe and welcoming. So again, that's something to keep in mind for anyone who is looking at that particular subject. If you can go to the next slide, which is amendment number 94. This is something that was proposed by Councilman Basil Dua, and that already has a lot of broad support. Again, they only need 8 votes to make things pass. And this is sort of just solidifying, this is the $7 million in overtime funds. This is really just solidifying what some of those funds would be used for. And it does reference the KPMG study, which largely said we actually have plenty of police officers, we're just not using them effectively. And just so people are aware, the national median for officers is like 1.8 officers per 1,000 residents, and we have 2.68. So well above the national average. And in our 200 million divestment proposal, we proposed that the cut would be 24%, which would take us down to the national median. But apparently that was seen as too radical for some people. And if you'll take us to the next slide, which is amendment number 96, it is a reduction to DPD temporary staff and unnecessary funding for memberships that will instead go to solar programs and bike lanes. And that's being proposed by Councilman Resendez. And then the next slide is amendment number 99. This is one that is led by Councilman Magoo, and that adds 1.9 million more to DPD's overtime budget. Again, undermining the progress that's already been made. It's no surprise coming from Councilman Magoo, who has largely been a proponent of all things policing when it comes to the city of Dallas, including being an ardent supporter of the juvenile curfew. And if you will take us to our last slide, which is probably the most infuriating of all of them, it is the one that is being proposed by Councilwoman Mendelson, who is basically saying that we should just get rid of everything that we've done up until this point and just go back to the originally proposed budget that the city manager put together at the beginning of this process, which again, I think completely undermines and is disrespectful to the democratic process, and just basically shows time and again that she has more of an allegiance to DPD than she does to listening to any of her constituents or anyone in the city of Dallas. And so if that has not angered you enough, I'm going to take it over to Jody, who is going to give some tips and best practices for your actual speech.
Hello, everyone. So, so we're going to be going over, like Christian said, your actual speech and what to expect when after you've signed up and you have your moment to speak to and address council. So, some of the things that you need to be aware of is to be flexible. And, we say that because WebEx, which is the platform they use to host all their meetings, WebEx is not super reliable. There will be a list of speakers posted the night before if you want to check out where you are on the list. When you address council you need to expect to wait to speak anywhere between 9 a.m. and noon. And that can be quite a wait. Sometimes, there's issues, there's tech issues that prolong that process, but you need to be flexible with your time and expect, I usually plan to expect some of those difficulties. Next week, we would love you to be prepared. And being prepared includes writing out major points and to practice your speech, which is extremely helpful. Before I started organizing with OCUF, I really didn't address council and didn't understand that, and it's been a huge help. You may think it may not help, but it's a big, big help. And be as specific as possible. It's better to say funding for 24-hour rec centers to benefit youth versus more money for youth. The council tends to take notice of those things when it's very specific. You may have anywhere between 1 to 3 minutes, so prepare a long version and then cut it down to a short version, so you're prepared either way. And what I've done in the past, I've watched the time and watched how the meeting is going, and I literally take notes of the notes I've made or the speech that I've made as the session is happening. Remember to speak your truth. You're unique. Don't think about what you think they want to hear. Say what you want to say. Use language that you're comfortable with. And like I said, you can have your speech written out. And like I said, I take notes, and that's always helped. I've always added something that's just really pushed forward what I wanted to push forward because I've heard other people speak their truth throughout the meeting. moving forward, be mindful of the guidelines. We encourage you to be passionate and straightforward. However, there are general guidelines for speakers. Be mindful of them. It's more important that we win than that we are right. Also, keep in mind you're speaking on a public forum. General guidelines, profanity will get you muted. Address the chair, mayor, or council, but not individual council members. We won't know the time you have until right before the section, which is between, like we mentioned, 1 to 3 minutes. And remember your power. In this meeting and beyond, you have the ability to get other people involved. You never know who's watching. You may end up inspiring someone, or your message may resonate with them. So keep going, even if you may not feel like you were heard or anything like that, but you definitely were, and somebody is going to be impacted by what you've shared. And we can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Next steps. So stay tuned to OCOF's social media pages for outcomes from the September 23rd budget vote and the total money divested from DPD. Get organized. The only way we can win is by building power, and that can only be done collectively. If you're not already involved in an organization, find one that fits your passion about and that matches find one that fits what you're passionate about and that matches your skills and time availability. We will be starting the process of onboarding people to join OCOF, so be on the lookout if you think OCOF is a good fit for you. Keep learning. We are all learning more and more about this process, and don't expect anyone to show up perfect. Take the time to read up about abolition, decarceration, white supremacy, and other systems that many of us are working to create or dismantle. Be heard. Make yourself heard. There will be plenty more opportunities to speak at council, especially if DPD continues to try and get more funds throughout the year. There are also local elections coming up, so if your council member did not meet the standard, let them know with your vote. You can also join efforts happening in the streets. And next, we will, am I doing this?
Yeah, no, it's me. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, I just clicked on it myself. And now I'm gonna pass it back to Christian.
Great, thank you all so much. Okay, so that's actually the end of our presentation. We wanted to keep things short, again, especially because Wednesday will probably be a very long day, keeping up with everything that is going on during the council meeting. We wanted to take some time in case anyone had specific questions that weren't addressed throughout the presentation or that have come up in the course of the presentation, which is also possible. So I'll give y'all a couple minutes if there's anyone that has a question. If you want to just write your question in the chat, or if you want to write stack, then that would be helpful. And we will be sending slides out to anyone that attended. So if you were trying to take notes seriously, I know some of us speak fast, mostly me, then we will send those out. So rest assured you can look through them at your own time before Wednesday. And hopefully everybody that's logged in here today has already signed up to speak. If you're able to, and if you already have signed up to speak, go bug some friends about it. We need everybody who can sign up to do that because we want to make sure we're heard loud and clear. And so, yes, to answer Benja's question in the chat, we can speak multiple times on Wednesday, which is like great. And I plan to do that because I want to be obnoxious about it. But technically, if you have not signed up to speak as an open mic speaker, you'd be able to sign up to speak 4 times. If you have signed up in the last month and spoke during open mic, you can only sign up for 3 times, but that's still 3 times. So you can make the most of those three times. You get at least 3 minutes, but possibly up to 9 minutes, which is a lot. But time goes by really quickly. And again, make sure to take heed of the points that we put forward about best practices, because it sounds easy enough, but then when you get there, especially if they are like, well, you only have a minute, it's easy to get really flustered and then sort of lose yourself. And you don't want to lose the impact of the words that you have to say by having your thought be cut off in the middle of what you're saying. Are there any other questions? Just gonna give it a couple minutes. If not, I have one other thing. Okay, so I have a question from Ben who says, I have spoken at open mic but never elsewhere, and my memory of the weird, very detailed form is intimidating. Any advice on what to select to make sure you can speak elsewhere? So I'm not sure if you were logged in during that part of the presentation, but we did have 3 specific agenda items that you could speak on. And so what I suggest doing, I normally just use the online form, even though it looks kind of weird and intimidating, because then you can just write out the specific agenda items on like what you're going to speak on. But you can also, when you call the city secretary, say, hey, I want to speak during open mic, and I also want to speak to agenda items number 61, 68, and 92. And so once they come to that agenda item, they'll say, hey, we're going to this agenda item, and we have 4 speakers for this agenda item, and then it'll have the list of speakers. And so when they release the names of speakers before, I guess usually by Tuesday evening, it'll show the speakers by the different agenda items. So it'll say, I think last time there were like 5 speakers for also a grant that a lot of us spoke on, and it had everybody's name listed out. Yes, 61, 68, and 92. And again, we will be sharing these slides, and it has the specific screenshot from the agenda for all of this. So don't feel bad if you couldn't remember. It is a lot to take in. But yeah, if you want to go to slide 8, Pat, actually, these are the specific items, and these were all pulled exactly from the agenda with the language. But again, some of the language is a little convoluted, and so we try our best to sort of explain what these items actually are. And there is a lot of information out there on the internet about the DOJ grant in particular, number 68, the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Association grant or assistance grant. There are a lot of like reports out there. So if you're feeling particularly nerdy, which I was whenever I was looking through it, there was a lot of information about what that grant is used for and how it's allocated. Anybody else have questions? I'll give it one more minute, and if not, then I'll close this out with this other thing that I would like to sort of center us with as we take on city council, I guess. That sounds like we're going into battle, but I think I'm really appreciative of everybody that has made the time to be on this call. And I've seen a lot of like familiar names, so it's clear that you've been very dedicated from the beginning to really seeing that this is something that happens, that this is something that is important, and understand the implications of what it actually would mean for our communities to be well resourced rather than policed, and what sort of city we could actually imagine if we took those brave steps to do that. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions. Again, we're still available via social media, so if anything pops up, feel free to send us a message. But I'm going to read this one last thing that I thought was very fitting, and this is from the Freedom Papers by a group called Dream Defenders, who do a lot of amazing work all throughout the country. And it, to me, was just like a very stark reminder of the world we're fighting for and the vision that we know we deserve. Imagine a world where no life is lost to a bullet or a jail cell, the grave or the cage. A world where children feel safe and free when they walk to the store, play at the park, and go to school. Imagine a world where every family, by blood or choice, has food on their tables and full bellies, homes to sleep at night, and good paying jobs. A world where an education or a medical emergency does not leave us in ruin. Where people are able to heal and reach their full potential, mind, body, and soul, where we have everything we need to fulfill our wildest dreams, where we know and care for our neighbors and know life is disposable. A world where our kids are raised and live without fear of abandonment, of violence, or of each other, where all life on earth is valued over profit and people are ruled by love over fear. Imagine a world where Trayvon Martin was offered a ride home instead. So with that, again, thank you all so much for joining us. This is our last budget season call, but you know, we are really grateful to have been on this journey with you. And you know, the fight's not over yet. It's another 2 really hectic days, but we really hope that you'll you know, reach out to people in your neighborhood, your family, your friends, your coworkers, anybody who lives, works, and plays in Dallas. And let them know of the importance of Wednesday, and that you're able to, you know, go out, speak your truth, and let us be heard. And regardless of what happens on Wednesday, we're going to keep fighting, and we're really glad to know that you will be joining us. So thank you all so much, especially for all your kind words. And you know, we will be seeing you here shortly, whether virtually or on the streets. You know, we look forward to your speeches. And again, if you have any help, need any help, we'll be sending out these slides. So look out for an email here in the next hour. Thank you all so much again. And if everybody wants to come off mute and just say, have a good night. Thank you all. Feel free
Can I
to.
try to say one last thing?
Yes, go ahead, Pat.
For the Save OC3, for anybody that lives in District 1, there is going to be a community meeting happening that we can probably share when we share the slides, if you do want to jump in, if you are a District 1 resident, because they are listening to us. So if you do live in Oak Cliff and want to share your input on ideas for the funds that were allocated, the $35,000, you can chime in tomorrow to talk to the council member, Chad West, and the Office of Arts and Culture.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat. Great. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.